Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a visual analysis of a journey that is, frankly, straight out of a nightmare. Picture this. You're driving alone on a pitch-black highway, right? It's surrounded by these dense, absolutely silent forests. Your eyes are burning from pure exhaustion, and literally the only thing you can hear is the deep rumble of your own engine. And then, bam, the chilling realization hits you. You aren't alone out here in the dark. In this explainer, we're going to break down the timeline, the psychology, and the absolutely terrifying evidence of what we now call the Highway 44 incident.
Okay, let's dive right into this. This whole nightmare really revolves around one core question. What actually happens when the person you're trying to help on a dark, lonely highway is, well, no longer human? We're analyzing the experience of Kamlesh. He's a truck driver making this grueling midnight run on India's infamous Highway 44. Now, this is an incredibly isolated stretch of road. The dense trees literally seem to swallow the light. Kamlesh is totally exhausted, just trying to keep his grip on the steering wheel when the unthinkable happens.
So, set the scene in your mind. It's midnight. Dead silence, except for the roaring engine and those vibrating tires. Out of nowhere, and I mean directly in the beam of his headlights, Kamlesh sees a white figure standing dead center in the middle of the road. He slams on the brakes. The screech of the tires just tears through the quiet night, and his massive truck violently jerks to a halt, literally just feet away from this shape. But when a terrified, sweating Kamlesh looks out the window, the road is completely empty. There's nothing there. He literally hits the dashboard, trying to convince himself, okay, it was just a hallucination, I'm just tired.
He breathes this huge sigh of relief, right? He goes to open the cabin door to get back inside. But then, a woman's voice cuts right through the dead of night. She calls out from the back of his truck. "Brother, can you drop me a little further? I've lost my way." Guys, Kamlesh's blood runs cold. He slowly turns around, and there, in the dim red glow of the truck's taillights, he sees a blurry silhouette. That brief, fleeting moment of relief, instantly shattered.
And you know, this brilliantly illustrates the psychological trap Kamlesh finds himself in. On one hand, his survival instincts are absolutely screaming at him. He tells her to leave. He's remembering all those urban legends, the ghosts with backward feet who lure in helpless drivers just to murder them. He knows for a fact no woman should be alone in this horrifying jungle at midnight. But, on the other hand, look at the hitchhiker's demeanor. She doesn't act like a monster at all. She speaks so politely. She points out her blistered feet. She's just wearing this old cotton sari and simply pleading that she needs to get back to the city to see her kids. She basically weaponizes his own morality against him, asking if it's a crime to help a helpless mother.
Kamlesh is beyond terrified. He feels this strange, unnatural coldness as she steps closer. His mind just kind of goes numb, and he desperately just wants her out of his line of sight. So he actually agrees to take her, but he sets some extremely strict survival conditions. She has to sit outside in the empty back portion under the tarpaulin. She's absolutely forbidden from coming near the cabin, and she has to knock on the metal to signal her stop. So he hears a light tap on the metal from the back, locks himself inside the cabin, and drives off. He feels this false sense of security behind that locked door. But almost immediately, he notices two super horrifying details. First, the truck feels unnaturally heavy. And second, when he tries to turn on the radio to break the silence, it emits nothing but pure, hissing static.
Then, the whole vibe shifts from supernatural dread to this profound human tragedy. Piercing right through the engine's roar, Kamlesh hears agonizing, painful sobbing coming from the back of the truck. Terrified she might actually cause him to drive off the road in a panic, he bravely slides open the back window of the cabin, just a tiny fraction, to ask her to stop crying. Well, the sobbing stops. She steps closer to the window, her face still completely hidden in the dark, and reveals this totally devastating backstory. She tells him her husband abused her relentlessly, blaming her for cursing the house because she was infertile and could never become a mother. He beat her, taunted her, and eventually just left her to die right there on the road.
This exact moment perfectly captures what we call the empathy trap. Hearing this horrific story of spousal abuse, Kamlesh's humanity completely overrides his fear. I mean, he tells her she didn't deserve that a person's worth isn't defined by having children, and that humanity is the greatest religion. He promises to drop her safely at her destination. Her sobs finally quiet down. Kamlesh feels this huge wave of relief, thinking, okay, I've calmed a tragic, wandering soul. And because of that, he completely lowers his guard.
He reaches for the gear shift, finally breathing easy. And then, out of nowhere, an ear-piercing scream absolutely shatters the calm. "Rollico! Stop!" The scream is literally so loud it feels like Kamlesh's eardrums are gonna burst. He slams on the brakes, the truck skidding to a really violent halt. The woman announces that her village has arrived and she's getting off here. Kamlesh looks around in total confusion. I mean, there is absolutely nothing out there but silent, dark forest. He asks her the name of the village, and she just replies, everyone calls it Sadi Gati. She steps out into the dark, takes a few steps, and completely vanishes into the mist.
Kamlesh is muttering to himself about how insane that encounter was. But he starts driving again, his fears slowly starting to subside. But guess what? The nightmare is actually just beginning. Shortly after she vanishes, his headlights illuminate this old, broken sign on the side of the road. It reads, Sati Gati. Absolute panic sets in. He accelerates to get the heck out of there. But then, horrifyingly, the headlights catch the exact same broken Sati Gati sign appearing out of the darkness again. He's caught in a supernatural, inescapable loop that literally defies all reality.
Over 100 kilometers per hour. Kamlesh's mind just completely shuts down. In a state of pure, unadulterated terror, he pushes this heavy, lumbering truck past 100 kilometers per hour on this ancient, broken road. The engine is absolutely screaming, the truck is bouncing violently, but he just keeps that accelerator pinned to the floor. He is desperately trying to outrun a nightmare that he is already trapped inside.
But as we know, you can't outrun the impossible. Desperate to avoid looking at that haunted sign yet again, Kamlesh violently jerks the steering wheel. On that wet mud and at that massive speed, the truck completely loses control. It violently smashes into a massive boulder. Boom! A devastating crash. The front of the truck is crushed, the engine is billowing smoke, and Kamlesh's head violently strikes the steering wheel. He somehow manages to tumble out of the door, bloody and battered, falling onto the road into absolute terrifying silence.
Now, the sheer isolation of Highway 44 really becomes its own character here. Bleeding on the road, Kamlesh finally sees headlights. A car is approaching. He waves frantically, jumping up and down, but the car speeds right past him. The driver either didn't see him or was just too terrified of this bloody man in the dark to stop. Later on, a truck approaches. Kamlesh stands literally right in the middle of the road. The truck sounds a terrifying long horn, but instead of slowing down, it speeds up. It nearly crushes Kamlesh to death. Completely and utterly isolated, he finally pulls out his phone. In the dim light, with his hands shaking uncontrollably, he calls his boss.
Kamlesh tells his boss everything. The white figure, the tragic woman, the impossible looping road, the crash, the whole shebang. Surprisingly, his boss doesn't yell at him. He actually calmly tells him not to panic, but asks him to immediately take photos of the truck and the crash site from every angle and send them over, so he can arrange for help. Kamlesh feels this immense relief. He's just incredibly grateful to have such an understanding boss who isn't, firing him on the spot.
So Kamlesh snaps the photos in the dark and hits send. He waits, and then his phone rings. But this time, his boss's tone has completely changed. It's no longer calm, it is pure, unadulterated panic. Which brings us to the climax of our explainer today. Why did the boss frantically call back demanding Kamlesh run for his life? What on earth did he see in those dark photos?
Okay, the crucial point here is the stark, downright terrifying instructions the boss screams through the phone. He tells Kamlesh, and I quote, "Run away from the truck immediately. Forget the truck. Flag down any vehicle, and if you can't, just start walking blindly until you find a petrol pump. And most importantly, no matter what you hear behind you, even if someone calls your name, even if you hear crying, do not look back."
Kamlesh doesn't ask questions. He just runs. He runs without looking back until he finally reaches a nearby village. But to really understand why the boss was so utterly terrified, we have to look at a fatal assumption Kamlesh made. His entire survival strategy was built on the idea that the ghost was safely locked outside, right? In the back of the truck, under the tarpaulin. He thought he was protected by those metal walls and the locked cabin door. But the terrifying reality of the supernatural is, it bypasses all physical barriers.
Days later, Kamlesh finally makes it back home and meets his boss. His boss, who is still visibly shaken by the way, pulls out his phone to show Kamlesh the photos from that night. And guys, this is the devastating reveal. In the final photograph Kamlesh took of the crashed truck, right there, sitting comfortably in the passenger seat inside the locked cabin, was a strange, smiling, sinister figure. It was the woman. She was never in the back of the truck. While Kamlesh was gripping the steering wheel, while he was talking to her through the window, while he was speeding at 100 kilometers an hour in sheer terror, she was sitting right next to him the entire time.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply chilling thought. Kamlesh thought he survived because he kept the danger outside. But the truth is, he survived purely by chance, completely oblivious to the horror sitting mere inches away from him.
Kamlesh never drove that route again, for sure, and he certainly never drove alone. Because while some paths are undeniably haunted by tragedies, are you ever truly sure who is sitting next to you in the dark? Think about that the next time you're driving alone at night. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive in The Explainer. We'll see you on the next one.